In the program Current Affairs, we now bring you a discussion on Foreign Trade Policy 2015 to 2020. The participants are V. Raghuraman, former Secretary General ASSOCHAM, Professor Aman Agarwal, Indian Institute of Finance, and Aditi Phadnis, Business Standard, who initiates and moderates the discussion.
The new government announced its first ever trade policy and announced it, interestingly, for 5 years. The most important features of the new trade policy are that it will rationalize previous subsidies and merge them into two categories of incentives. One is called the Merchandise Export from India scheme and the other one called the Services Export from India scheme. In other words, there will be merchandise export separately and services export separately. The main feature of the policy is also that it works towards dovetailing India with the World Trade Organization, something that has been a bit of a contentious issue in the past. It will encourage exporters to look for new areas to sell their products and will aim to eliminate trade distortions which have crept in. There are several areas where the policy is not explicit or is silent, but we'll come to that presently. Mr. Raghuraman, what do you think are the most important features of the new trade policy and what is it geared at?
If you look at our trade policy in the last 2 decades, especially after the reforms have been introduced, I remember 1992 when I was in this forum, our exports were hardly $22 billion. From there we have come to $312 billion of merchandise exports now, and also our share of the global trade has gone up from 0.4% at that time to about 2%. And surely we have been looking for the new trade policy for the last 9 months. And we are happy that we have been able to get it. And of course, the 5-year plan which has been announced is not something which I would say is new, because even the earlier UPA government had a 5-year policy, but they used to be tweaked every year. So what is being done this time is a 5-year plan with a midterm review rather than an annual review. And there are features, as you said, that they have collapsed several of these incentive schemes into 2 buckets, one of merchandise and other of services. And also emphasis is being given to see that we integrate the Make in India, the Digital India and the Skills India together so that we will be able to reap the benefits. And also see if there are interministerial and other kinds of issues, they can be actually solved online. And the other point is also with respect to service, which has been concentrated with just IT and ITES, is being expanded to include many areas such as healthcare, especially yoga, branding exercise, and also education, R&D, and definitely it's possible for us to see that we can diversify and also intensify the markets and also the products. So this is actually a good thing that we are having a midterm view rather than a short-term view, and it is possible that over a period of time we will be able to achieve the targets which have been announced, which I think is not very ambitious.
The targets being?
The target being $900 billion in 5 years of total exports.
Up from
$460 billion is not a big thing, and it's achievable because it has underlined the type of deficiencies which are in a system like infrastructure, logistics, and also the procedural other kind of delays which act as a barrier towards foreign trade. And also we have certain barriers even today on services, like say legal services. You do not allow the foreigners to do their practice here. So I think if we actually open up, it's definitely possible for us to expand the services to a much better lot and also have more kind of services included which will give us the right cutting edge.
Dr. Agarwal, Mr. Raghuraman gave us a very nice, wide panorama of all the things that the new trade policy covers. But if we take them one by one, then what specifically are the problems of merchandise export? Gems and jewelry, manufacturing, all this can only find new frontiers and new markets if these are efficient and if they are competitive and government does enough to make them sell outside.
As you rightly pointed out that there is an importance of competitive productivity which needs to come out. But more than that, I think which this document lays forward is extensive stress on reducing bottlenecks. through the use of digitalization and making a single window system, an online pervasive system which could help the exporter or the importer file documents, file certifications, and even apply for newer permits. Now, these are some things which the government sees as big bottlenecks which built up cost for small vendors more than large vendors in specific. And that's where they're trying to reduce a huge section of the documentation of a 168 pages report. A large section is devoted towards how do they convert almost every segment, whether it is in the services basket or the manufacturing basket, how do the merchandising basket convert it into an online system framework so that it becomes easier, not only for a person from within the country, but even from an outsider who wants to do an import-export from within the country. That's where the Make in India comes in, that you want to bring in companies, institutions, entrepreneurs to come and produce here and make this as an export hub as in India as a country. When you talk of gems and jewels itself, which is one of the large trade components, to my surprise and to many Indians it may be that India is the largest exporter of gems and jewels in the world. We do not have the raw material, that is all imported from different parts of the world, but largely carved into what becomes the sellable commodity to the rest of the world, despite the fact that we do not price them. Similar is the case with gold and some of the other precious metals, where we do not price them, but we are one of the largest exporters, and in certain cases like gold, even the largest consumers of gold in the world. So from that perspective, the government has tried to ease certain norms, keeping in view the WTO perspective, keeping in view the FTA perspective which is coming forward. Since the WTO negotiations have fallen apart over a decade back, now the thing which has moved on with India is multi-trade agreements which are coming in, with the focus on FTAs being set up, not only with large trade groups or trade blocks around the world, but with individual companies all over the world. BRICS is another initiative in the same front.
So we'll come to FTAs and what bilateral trade pacts mean in a moment. Dr. Raghuraman, what is the problem with services export and how does the new trade policy address this and correct this?
The services have been actually going on without much of prodding from the government till the IT ministry was formed. In fact, it was going as an invisible type of a thing, in the sense that there was not much understanding of it in the government, and also there was not much of an idea that we have soft power and it is possible for us to work in healthcare, because our entire WTO discussions and were actually centered around pharmaceutical, especially the drugs and patents issue, rather than looking at healthcare as a thing, which is a good opportunity, and also way of seeing to it that a traditional medicine, yoga, etc. could be branded and we can get these properly across. And also in education, we can provide world-class education facilities, etc. and accounting. In fact, these are all the things which has to be broad-based and not just confine ourselves to IT and ITS, because they are concentrated on Western markets and it is highly risky to be concentrated only onto these markets. So we need to see that geographically we spread and also have our services have a larger basket so that we are able to get the right kind of demand met globally, and also see to it that we also benefit from that by upgrading our own skills within the country, because we will be able to get the right kind of scale. So I think it's important for us to understand that services sector is in for a big leap in the country, and also it's not just this project exports, construction, many of these which are not EPC contracts, which may not be just involving this. Second, with the opening of the defense and aerospace, and also if we look at from the point of view of the project exports, etc., I think we have a big opportunity opening up for us, because like South Korea has done, we'll be able to give what we call as the projects turnkey basis on a very cost-effective basis. And it is possible provided, as the government has intended, to look into the integration of various types of strengths we have and also remove the bottlenecks. But this is very easily said than done. Probably this is a work in progress, and we have to watch as to how we are able to make this happen. Because in the short run we have real challenges. Because we see February exports have really contracted by 15%. And also we find that the global economy, except the US, is not doing well. And with the oil prices going down, the spending power of the oil-rich countries have gone down. So to that extent, we will be affected with exports in the short run. Already two-wheelers exports have come down. So I think what's important for us to see is the medium term, and also see how we can improve our productivity and transaction costs, especially delays. with respect to the berthing of ships, with respect to unloading, loading, and also movement within the country. In fact, all this will take like the Delhi-Mumbai corridor coming in or the Chennai corridor. So I think we need to really see as to how we will be able to have the transaction cost down and also have our own internal procedures by taking use of the digital revolution which is going to come, and definitely we will be able to see the better days. But today we don't have an Indian common market, and there's a problem with respect to taxation issues, state and center, and we find that the duty drawback which is supposed to be paid in time is never done. And I think what we talk about duty scripts today and they being freely available, transferable, I think we have to see exactly how it happens and whether it's done in time.
Dr. Agarwal, Mr. Raghuraman has raised the issue of taxes. Although you don't expect that to be spelled out in the trade policy, we have to agree that there is a serious problem that exporters face. Actually, everybody faces that, and when exporters have their hand tied behind their backs, although they've been spared the volatility of the currency, which they were facing in the past, so there's a relatively stable currency regime now, but the issue of the minimum alternate tax, the dividend distribution tax, these are all issues which make it really difficult for people to work. What is your view on this?
I agree with you. Taxes are something which no one ever appreciates, despite the necessity of some of these components to be there. Not to forget that there have been under-invoicing and over-invoicing of bills going on for centuries, almost at least about 5-6 decades. We conducted a study which showed billions of dollars being flown from India to the United States itself on a small commodities of goods way back in 94-95, when just 1 million was coming and the government was saying we have brought in so much money, and 4 to 5 millions were just going out on a monthly basis on certain specified goods only, when the trade was only 40% with the United States. Now imagine that kind of under-invoicing and over-invoicing of bills taking place. So taxes only would deter away some of these things to take place if the taxes are substantially low and comfortable for any producer to actually produce and function. Does it stop trade? It actually does not deter trade today. What is the benefit of India coming up is low cost, good quality products which Indian producers and even foreign producers are able to produce on this land and export to the rest of the world. There are a large number of manufacturers, whether it is an automobile, whether it is in other components, we see are making India as the base to manufacture and supply to the rest of Asia and the world as well. So if taxes were a major cause of concern, then the foreign participants would not typically come in and produce. What is actually important is to reduce these bottlenecks. Even these foreign participants have had to go through 2 to 3 years of a setup period to before start functioning. For a small enterprise, even to a 500 crore business, it becomes very difficult if they have so much of a lag, because their cost effectiveness tremendously goes down and they may run out of business and not being able to pay their loans which they have taken from the banks and financial institutions. If this kind of a lag for a small enterprise having a turnover of less than 500 crores comes up, and this is where the trouble is. And I think this document this time is different from the other documents in the past, that it has tried to excessively stress on this particular need to do away with the human intervention to whatever possible. Can we do it away completely? It cannot be done away. Whether taxes are there, once we start seeing streamlining of systems, whatever is being produced being reported, you will automatically see revenues go up. Government will automatically want to reduce the tax base and bring it out to as low as possible. They will like to be more competitive in nature into the world markets. But that will only be possible once the producers, people who are here serving, they are able to report appropriately. And I think we need to be judicious on both sides. The government has tried to take up initiatives. It is not a short-term measure. It will take time to change the way a producer or an individual behaves. Takes time. But fortunately, there is a positive confidence in the government. They are seeing positive changes which are taking place, whether it is in the forefront of infrastructure, whether it is in telecommunication, whether it is digitalization. They are seeing those changes come up, and I think the industry is responding positively towards it. Not only within the country, but even industry from overseas is seeing it as a favorable move. We are seeing more participants from various industry corners coming into the country in the last 7-8 months, as we saw in the last 2 preceding years. And I think that clearly shows the kind of the acceptability and the confidence they are now coming to see with India in terms of doing trade and increasing the trade benefits. And I think the numbers which are being quoted, if this goes on the same way as it is in the last 6 months, we may even see triple the value. We may cross the forecasted $900 million and go up much beyond that if we are able to do and continue this movement.
Mr. Raghuraman, this is a trade policy and it's a policy, but nevertheless it must take into account some very interesting realities realities that we are currently seeing. One is very, very low crude prices. The other is equally low agri-commodity and commodity prices across the world. This means two things for us. One, that manufacturing and other allied activities become a little less expensive because crude is low. But it also means that our agri-exports don't get as much play because, frankly, with our minimum support price and other things, the Indian agricultural goods today are more expensive. I mean, there's been a 20% drop in agri-commodity prices in the last quarter of 2014, and they are promising to fall even more. So how do you address this twin whammies, as it were?
If you look at from the point of view of agri-commodities, because the government has been really obsessed with cereals especially, and we have neglected others, in the sense that you look at the one which happened to guar gum. Government did nothing, but guar gum went up because of drilling operations in the shale production in the US, and it went up to $16 billion in 1 year. So the reason is there are fluctuations in the market, and we have to really see exactly how the market really plays out. Now in this case, like sugar or with respect to this, government should look at the policy of maintaining the type of buffers which are there, which is too much, and you find that most of it we do not know because we are not able to even use that buffer properly when we are having too much of stored inside. So I think what is important for us to see that agri prices and also the export-import policy need to be properly streamlined. We have knee-jerk reaction. Suddenly if the onion prices go up, immediately we say stop the exports. These are all long-term, and we need to say if we want to have long-term markets, we need to see that we have a stable policy and the ways of actually stabilizing prices within the country when shortages occur and how they can be really mapped. So this is where I think we need to really go for opening up retail trade, which I think this government is still not making up its mind. So I think unless we have the cold chains and the right kind of facilities, and also have the private sector alternate to FCI so that they actually act as the ways of having the right buffer stocks which are needed, and also have the farm to fork type of thing done so that we bring them into the streamline, so that they go from subsistence farming to commercial farming, so that they are able to get the benefits of the global trade and also to understand exactly how the global trade works. And we cannot do anything on this commodity prices diving down because this is something not in our hands. And unless we become a global producer, we are the biggest producer of vegetables and fruits, etc. And we need to see that we are able to add proper value. In this, of course, the export policy talks about incentives for agro-processing products, etc. I think this is a good thing so that we value add and understand.
The budget also had some provisions.
Yeah, I think it's good. But the point is we need to see, as was rightly pointed out by Mr. Agarwal, how the small players could be aggregated so that their issues are also taken care of. Because big players, big boys are able to actually find their own means and they are able to get the global hookups also. But with respect to small and the medium, how to really bring them? Because that is where the real jobs lie, and that is where we have to see exactly how they can be made and branded so that they get right value for what they do.
Dr. Agarwal, you had mentioned this initially, this issue of bilateral and regional partnerships. There are two things happening simultaneously. One is India needs to get integrated into world trade. It needs to be immersed into it much more. But also it is striking bilateral deals with countries, with regions, to do trade with them at different terms without actually violating WTO, which is beneficial to both the parties. Now, in this trade policy, what do you see will be the future of all these economic partnerships which have trade as the center, as focal point, and where are they going to go in this trade policy?
In India, we produce some of the best high-end products, very specialized, very highly in demand, very high in technology, and very low-end products also, both in good in quality and poor in quality. Now, different markets around the world have different requirements for different goods and services. Now, these goods then can be matched up with different countries if we are able to have these different multilateral trade agreements with different countries. The advantage it gives to India is a much better position tomorrow in the WTO or at a global face. Once it already has formal tie-ups with large part of the world, which actually in the last 10-15 years, India has been able to move forward with different kind of countries. They are geographically small in size, big in size, different continents, and I think this gives India an advantage of having a much more stronger step, because today it does not need the WTO framework to facilitate trade for the Indian enterprises. It needs that trade framework is already in place. The WTO becomes more smoother, more uniform, Do we need uniformity? The question before entrepreneurs is, we do not need uniformity because different entrepreneurs have different needs, they function in different environments, and their comfort zones with different environments is there. Now these different country multilateral trade agreement, multi-regional trade agreements provides them with that framework as to whoever can function wherever is able to filter in, and this helps the government create that framework for the diverse industrial background which comes from all over the country, uniformly divided, unlike in China where it is more catered to a specific segment and largely held by the government. Here it is being more privately held, and this diversity is being able to be met through this multilateral trade agreement. Another component I would like to add on, the oil prices which you talked about. I don't think we are going to see a big bust of the oil prices because of the oil nations having pegged their future incomes at a very high price which they thought would they be able to get for the next 20-25 years, and there has been a huge revenue fall. So to meet up their current payment schedules, they will have to keep the oil prices low. So that bubble bust is not expected for another year or so to come up. However, one should understand that once prices rise up, whether it is because of international markets or because of taxes or any other framework, a producer anywhere around the world does not cut on prices unless there is a severe competition. An Indian market, given the diverse need and requirements which are still not met by the Indian producers or foreign producers, we will not see that come forward. So we are going to see some healthy competition just to eyewash most of the retail products or any other means, but it's going to be still remaining at that level. So reducing taxes or reducing oil prices would not typically benefit the end consumer or common man to that great extent today. So I think the trade policy does provide for some incentivization. This will help build up again on the multilateral trade framework and help them move forward.
Raghuraman, one thing that the policy does not spell out properly or adequately, I think, is where do we stand today on that great white wonder, the special economic zone. The special economic zones were created to promote exports. They were given a kind of unseen, invisible incentives which other places did not have, but apparently they have run their course, or have they?
I don't think that the SEZ will make any more dent today, because if you see this China or other models, in fact their entire thing was export-led growth. India is an entirely different model, growth-led exports. So I think we have not really concentrated, and we have actually been bogged down with many types of issues which no other country has ever faced. And also if you look at the kind of inputs given there, in fact, power costs are the cheapest over there, because in China, Thailand, Korea, the industry pays the lowest power prices. And also if you look from the point of capital, in fact, you find China, capital is available so cheap. And here is the small and medium and the exporters, you find that they have to park the money, they have to get at a higher rate, and also you find the delays in getting the payments and the duty drawbacks, etc. In fact, these are all adding on to the cost. In fact, if you look at just a margin of 6 to 8% in the export market, and if you find that if you are going to have this kinds of bottlenecks, surely you find that our competitiveness is totally affected. This is where we do hope that the government will put its real act together and see to it that these kinds of irritants are removed.
Dr. Agarwal, what do you think about SEZ?
I think the SEZ, firstly, it's not there to go. Large number of states government have not implemented it so far, even till today, in various segments. They are looking forward to it. The second component from the industry perspective is that the benefit which the SEZs were offering are now available in different countries around the world. And today these corporations are able to base themselves there, work within the country and take all their revenues there and take those benefits which the SEZs were able to offer. And that's why you have seen that sluggishness in terms of the benefits which SEZs could offer, as against what used to be there 10 or 15 years back, following the SEZ schemes from the United States and other parts of the world, where they became a big success because things were bounded in the boundary. Today there is no boundary. Most countries operate in different countries for their head offices itself and just for managing. If you look at Europe, Luxembourg is one of the places where most largest companies have their head offices, maybe a small shop which may be there, but their all accountings are settled in Luxembourg primarily from the tax benefit perspective. And that makes Luxembourg rich and those companies rich, whereas there are no operations in the rest of the world of Europe. Similar is the case which is happening in India today, and that's what has reduced the use. But the MSME segment would certainly benefit, because the MSME segment does not have the reach to go across borders and get into the entanglement of the foreign exchange regulation, which is not so easy for a small firm to handle and even get their permits and so on and so forth, or to do overseas transactions so easily. from that perspective, I think the MSME segment would still find the SEZ more favorable. The lacuna there again comes in is the infrastructure. And I feel if this infrastructure policy framework, which is there in the main framework of the government, is brought in, the SEZs would come back on their pace. And we will see state governments coming up with their proposals of the SEZs in different parts of the country. Not to forget, in the Arabic region, they only introduced the SEZ framework only about 5 years back. And they're still continuing with that framework because they have seen a huge amount of investment come in. In Africa and certain countries, they've introduced the SEZ framework for foreigners to just come in the last 5 years in specific. So to think that this particular framework policy structure is going off, it is not. It's only a question of what can we offer better and if we can really make it more smoother and more easier for the MSME segment to function and produce and make the growth for the country and themselves.
Mr. Raghuraman, there are one or two interesting ideas in the trade policy which we have not seen before. For instance, state incentives on services were offered only to domestic players. Now they will be available to foreign players as well, provided they operate from India.
Yes.
So this means that the hotel industry, for instance, earlier only the Taj group of hotels was given the incentives. Now if Marriott opens an office here, is also entitled to those incentives. I think this is being bitterly resented by the Indian hotel industry.
We should not look at just one segment. We look at the total, tourism, healthcare, look at the entire range of services and let's not be crowded by this. Because if earlier we had the SEZs working only as TPI, mostly software, exports, etc. We need to look beyond. And for that, it opens a window and we should be having an open mind. And on the government side also, we should open up all the kind of services so that we get the right kind of global framework operating in our country. When we are aspiring to be a global power, it's better that we also transcend our own type of initiatives to get to that goal.
I'm going to ask both of you the same question, Mr. Raghuraman first. This trade policy, does it mean that India's trade will deepen, widen, increase through avenues even so huge as the Trans-Pacific Partnership or the Transatlantic Partnership, of which India is a member of neither at the moment? Or will it give a boost to bilateral, regional trade pacts in a more concentrated and focused way?
We are going to have more segments opening up more geographies and we will have a different kind of products and services. And also there are a lot of areas that products and services actually blur in the sense that we embedded software, etc. And I think that's where we're going to have real advantage because of India's software strength and also its ability to put up services and also products. And if we have our real logistics in place and infrastructure, I'm sure that we can give anybody a real run for the money.
Dr. Agarwal.
The policy would envisage an increase and the prime focus is along the lines of what the government has been talking before and even the budget talks about is employability. Employability through induction of foreign participation and even NRIs who are based overseas to bring in their investment and start producing here and making more people employable. The biggest challenge before the government today is not only to reduce the cost of the goods and services so that inflation eases down and the common man is comfortable, but also to be able to meet the large youth which we have, huge youth of about 60% between the age group of 15 and 50-55, and I think that youth needs to be employable gainfully and not having in a wrong direction. And I think that's where the Make in India movement and this policy is focused.
So India has arrived and the world should be ready for it. This is the message of the new trade policy. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for a very, very enlightening discussion.
You were listening to a discussion on Foreign Trade Policy 2015 to 2020. The participants were V. Raghuraman, former Secretary General ASSOCHAM, Professor Aman Agarwal, Indian Institute of Finance, and Aditi Phadnis, Business Standard, who initiated and moderated the discussion. It came to you in the program Current Affairs, produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, news.on.air.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.